Hey folks, Seth here. It's that time of year again. Guns Etc. huge anniversary event. This year it's on Saturday, October 24th only. There'll be tons of giveaways and one-day only discounts in the store. Over the years, this event has turned into a gathering of folks who love America and the right to bear arms. As you know, our world may dramatically change on November 3rd. Can you imagine what a Biden-Harris administration will do to the Second Amendment then? If you're concerned about that, make sure you visit Guns Etc. on Saturday, October 24th. For more information, go to gunsetcetera.com. And if you like these monologues, please subscribe to 960 The Patriots YouTube channel.
Welcome back and happy Thursday, October 22nd, 2020. We go into the presidential debates tonight under conditions I don't think we've ever witnessed before. I'm not speaking of anything having to do with health safety. I'm speaking of the midst of a storm that has defied physics. The storm defies physics because nothing like it has ever been seen before. It hits the same neighborhoods, but only affects certain homes. Through February, we were still trying the President of the United States for impeachment based on a telephone call he had with his Ukrainian counterpart, asking the President of Ukraine to address corruption in his country as we supplied money and arms to Ukraine. The House of Representatives had already voted to impeach the president, and to quote the Speaker of the House, the president would be impeached forever. What we now have is evidence beyond peradventure that the former vice president, who's not the president yet, but a candidate for president, has a son who is doing big business in Ukraine and also China, with a lot of documentation that while his dad was vice president, he was using his dad to further those business dealings, and that his dad may have been a witting participant. What we do have is evidence based beyond peradventure that the vice president, when he was vice president, did dangle foreign aid over the head of the Ukraine on conditions of them firing a prosecutor who claims he was investigating the vice president's son's company. And what we have today, going into the debate, what we've had since last year, is a media that doesn't want to report on or investigate any of this at all. We have documents. We have the vice president's own words on video. We have corroborations from at least one business partner of the vice president's son. Oh, and we have the statements of the former vice president that, email documents to the contrary notwithstanding, he never spoke to his son about any of those business dealings. We also have a very wealthy son of the ex-vice president and an inexplicably very wealthy ex-vice president. What we don't have is, to repeat, a media that cares one whit about any of this. What we do have is a social media constellation that bans discussion of this. This is the storm I'm speaking of. Corruption, foreign countries, foreign policy, pay for play, foreign policy for play. It's a big storm. And yet, with much clearer skies and thinner clouds, the current president was impeached. With dark skies and clouds, with daily gathering force, gale force, the storm seems not to matter, not to be worthy of reporting, but yes, to be worthy of censoring. It's not just journalistic corruption. It's political corruption, taken up by not just a political party, but corporate, private, social networks, which means it's really the corruption of an entire polity. It affects all of us because it affects an election of the president. And it affects all of us because while a great many know there is something going on, they refuse to tell the people, the polity, about it. And a great deal of the polity does not want to know about it or let it get in the way of their political convictions. If a governor knew a storm or hurricane were coming and refused to tell his or her citizens, he or she would not just be impeached, but shamed out of a public career and respectability. Hung in effigy, or hanging in effigy, would be the least of it. We have a storm. We have a hurricane. And that is what is happening, a cover-up, a literal cover-up, but not from a governor or the president, but from the near entire media, along with corporate social media and the entirety of an opposite opposing political party. This problem is not new, and it is not uncontemplated. Aristotle, in Book 5 of his Nicomachean Ethics, writes that when it comes to political justice, it everywhere has the same force and does not exist by people's thinking this or thinking that. In other words, justice, especially political justice, should work the same regardless of interest or partisan preference. As Aristotle put it, fire burns in Athens as it burns in Persia. There is a natural uniform nature to justice, especially political justice, just as there is to fire. But that is not true in America today, not right now, and that is what rankles. Take two criminals. One steals from a Republican, one steals from a Democrat. Now take a police force, a prosecutor, and a courtroom that only arrests those who thieve from Democrats. Take a media that only reports on that thievery. Is that justice? Take a social media that allows discussion and republication of thievery against Democrats, but puts the kibosh on discussion and republication of thievery against Republicans. Is that justice? Take a party that cares about thievery against it, but not against its political opposites or opponents. Is that justice? Hell no. And it's not even politics. Because you cannot have politics in a republic dedicated to fairness and justice when every structure to ensure fairness and justice is corrupt and one sided. The word corrupt, it might be a good time to remind, comes from the Latin corruptus, meaning to destroy. In other words, not only is politics becoming impossible because corrupt, but the polity is in same like being destroyed. I quoted Aristotle. Let me quote his teacher, Plato. For we are being forced back into the cave. We once lived unenlightened. We were then given enlightenment. We built a city around reality rather than fiction. And we are now being herded back into fiction, into darkness, back into the allegorical cave. This is obviously the opposite of progress. Those who lived in dark regimes know exactly what this is. When one party or the state in the hands of one party dictates what can and cannot be known, you have tyranny. I thought we got this. I thought we knew this. The whole point of the First Amendment was the chief bulwark to ensure this. As Jefferson put it, error of opinion may be tolerated where reason is left free to combat it. Okay, that is a beautiful expression and summary of free thought and the entire project of the Enlightenment. But what if reason is no longer allowed or free to combat errant opinion? Perhaps now you can begin to understand why I worry so much and dedicate so much of my monologue time in the recent past to the concern over our blasé, indifferent, and impassive reaction to the rise and ascent of Marxist movements and beliefs here in America. It's not as if world history is not replete with examples and societies that did live that way, in Stygian darkness that tolerated no freedom of thought, opinion, press, that tolerated no reason. Turns out, in fact, America and freedom were the exception to those examples. It was but one of the very many things that made us unique by contrast to them. Trusting the people, trusting truth, and allowing both to flourish. Which is why it also worries me when the very former vice president we spoke of above says things like he did yesterday. Quote, America was an idea, an idea. We hold these truths to be self-evident. We never lived up to it, but we never walked away from it. And I just think we have to be more honest. Let our kids know as we raise them what actually did happen. Acknowledge our mistakes so we don't repeat them. Close quote. What does he possibly mean by saying such a thing? Does anyone not acknowledge our mistakes? Or is the problem rather that we don't acknowledge our successes? And what is the notion that this country was an idea? And why can't he complete that sentence ever? Self-evident that all men were created equal. And what does he mean by never lived up to it? Did the 7,000 Americans who fought our revolution and died not live up to it? What are the subsequent 1.5 million Americans that died in all our other wars? And that's just militarily. What of all the people in this country who have done other patriotic duty? And finally, how do you not walk away from it if you are not walking in support of it? Let me try that this way. We've never walked away from what? Mr. Biden, a great thing? A great idea? Now please tell me, what idea was 1619? Did we or did we not walk away from that? Was not 1776 a walking away from it? Was not the Revolution and the Civil War and the Civil Rights Acts a walking away from it? A redounding to Marxism is the very walking away from 1776. And what I worry about more than anything else is that the walk has become a run. I worry about political leaders thinking we are only an idea. I worry about people who think the greater idea is to distort and bury the ideas of 1776. Here's our problem. As Harry Jaffa wrote, in 1776, the United States was, so to speak, nothing, but it promised to become everything. Having become everything, we now must worry that it will turn to or become nothing. Charles Kessler adds this: the US will become nothing if it suffers a great military defeat in the next war. But more profoundly, the US will become nothing if it becomes persuaded that it stands for nothing. When the central ideas of our political traditions become blurred and obscured, when Americans no longer understand what it is that makes them a people, then they will cease to be a people. I'm Seth Leibson. We'll be right back.